Hey, so I'm going to be upfront immediately in this video and tell you that this build includes Consecration. Why am I telling you that now? Well, as a lot of you know, Consecration is probably the best perk that Prismatic Titans have since Final Shape launch, and it's been quite some time since it's been out, so a lot of people have probably already seen the footage for these types of builds, as that's like the main Titan build. And the reason I'm telling you that now is because if you have, well, then, you know, you get the idea, you get the concept. That's cool. If you don't want to watch the rest of the video, that's fine. I understand. But, me personally, I try to farm out the items myself on my own account as long as it takes. Then I try to play the build, see if I like it, and if I do, then I talk about it on the channel. I don't go on other people's accounts and then use their footage or their items and then record and be like, hey guys, here's this guy's account. Here's how the build works. I get it myself, even if, you know, it takes me a while. It is what it is. So, I got the items on my own, and now I want to talk about it. Plus, I just want to archive it on my channel, show it to my community. People ask me, like, hey, what is the Titan build that you're using? Here you go, and so on. Anyway, into the build. So the exotic class item I'll be using for this Prismatic build is going to be Heart of Inmost Light plus Syntheseps. I know, big shocker. Although I do want to ask, do people have any other combinations in mind that they think would be fun to use besides this main one that everybody would want to use, you know? I want to try out different things, especially with Bungie buffing the Titan perks in the future that they mentioned today. And of course, the goal of the build is going to be to Consecration Slam everything into dust in ad-based activities, or ad-dense-based activities anyway. So let's get into the abilities. First is our super. We're going Blade Fury. Common, I know, but the main two purposes of this is going to be number one, to have Woven Mail on demand pretty easily via our fragments, and number two, utilizing Blade Fury to get additional melee charges. If you don't know what I mean, basically, you start with 3 melee charges, use all of them up for your Consecration Slam. Spoiler alert, we're going to have 3 charges. And then, once you use Blade Fury after that, and used up the entire super, whether you're using it for suspend or just damage, once it's gone, you will then have 3 new melee charges back, so you can Consecration Slam 3 more times before having to utilize Prismatic and then go into even more Consecration Slams. As for the core abilities, first we have our class ability, which is Thruster instead of Barricade. The main reason for this is obviously to keep up with Inmost Light for our regen, but it also ties in with one of our aspects as well, so we'll get to that in a second. But moving on, we have our melee and our grenade. Both of these are strand-based and, to be specific, darkness-based, so you can utilize this with another fragment in our kit. But for the melee, we have Frenzied Blade. Basically, you get Sever, which is good, but mainly you get the 3 melee charges, which means you can do the 3 slams with Consecration Slam, and then go into your super, like I mentioned, get 3 more charges and do 3 more slams. That's the main goal of having this, at least for me. Then in the grenade slot, we have Shackle Grenades. Like I said, it's a darkness ability, it suspends, so you can do this on like barrier champions or unstoppable champions, or just utilize it as an ability for inmost / crowd control. As for our aspects, obviously number 1 is going to be Consecration. We want to just slam entire rooms into dust as fast as we can, so while sliding, activate your charge melee ability to launch a solar wave of energy forward, damaging and scorching targets in front of you as leap in the air, and then while you're airborne, you can activate it again to slam down and make everything explode. Our second aspect, believe it or not, is not Knockout. Now, don't get me wrong, I understand why people use Knockout. It's a great aspect to use, and that's totally fine. But I went with something different. I went with Drenger's Lash. I think I said that right. Drenger's Lash is basically another way to utilize a darkness-based ability in order to buff your light ability damage via our fragments. So I combined this with Thruster that I mentioned earlier, and you can thrust near a group of enemies that you have not Consecration Slammed yet, string them up in the air, and then consecrate them into dust. And if you don't happen to have a consecrated ability to use, then you just kill them with your weapons. Simple as that. Also, utilizing Drenger's Lash gives us 6 fragments instead of 5, so that was also another reason why I wanted to try that instead of Knockout. Now, speaking of our fragments, we're going to go left to right. There are 6 of them. These are not set in stone by any means. If you want to use different combos or you disagree with some of these, that's totally fine, but this is what I went with for this build. Number 1 is Protection. As always, while you're surrounded by combatants, you gain more resistance to incoming damage, so more DR on top of Woven Mail. Why wouldn't you want that when you're a melee-based build? Number 2 is going to be Facet of Hope. While you have an elemental buff, your class ability regenerates more quickly, trying to get our abilities back to keep the uptime on Inmost Light through our class item. Number 3 is going to be Facet of Grace, because this lets us build our Prismatic even faster when we're using kinetic weapons to get Transcendent Energy, and spoiler alert, we're using a kinetic-based weapon in this build. Number 4 is going to be Facet of Ruin. It does something with stasis, but we don't care about that because we're not using stasis. But it also increases the area of effect for solar ignitions, which is going to tie in with our consecration slams for bigger explosions. Number 5 is Facet of Purpose. Picking up an Orb of Power will grant you Amp, Restoration, Frost Armor, or Woven Mail, or an Orb Shield based on the damage type of your equipped super. So in this case, we have Blade Fury, so we're going to get instant Woven Mail anytime we make an orb, and basically anytime we do a melee thing in this build, we will make an Orb of Power. And finally, if you don't use Knockout and instead go with something else to have 6 fragments, the last one is going to be Facet of Courage. So your Arc, Solar, and Void abilities deal increased damage to targets afflicted with darkness debuffs. In this case, if you used our melee, our grenade, our super, our class ability, whatever, on let's say a champion, a yellow bar, etc., then Facet of Courage will pop off when you do your Consecration Slam because they've been afflicted with a darkness debuff, and thus you do more damage. So if you have Synthos procced and this procced, more than likely you will either just one-shot that enemy or make them very low with just one single Consecration Slam. Now, as for artifact perks, if you're going with this build in episode 1 anyway, are going to be the main ones here in the bottom 5. You can use Threaded Blast if you like, that's totally up to you, but these other 5 are the main ones. These are going to be Radiant Orbs, which gives you Radiant when you pick up an orb, pretty straightforward. Galvanic Armor, if you happen to be running the Knockout variant. When you're amplified, you get even more damage resist on top of the stuff you already have. That's always good. Solar Fulmination, which is just increased damage and an increased radius when you do your Consecration Slams. That's easy for your damage. And then finally, Shield Crush and Transference, which are basically just pumping more damage via your grenade/melee. In this case, you know, your melee mainly. And then for other points to make out from the build is I use Outbreak Perfected because, again, as I have always said, it is a monster for both Transcendent Energy in Light and Dark, and also to build up your super extremely fast, which in turn gives us 3 more melee charges in the event that we want to use that before utilizing Prismatic, so it's just a godsend to any Prismatic build. Other than that, you can use whatever weapons you'd like for a particular activity where you might need certain champion stunning capabilities. And lastly, for mods, I'm just going to name out some good mods to have in this build. If you want a full breakdown of all of them, I'll have the dim build below in the description as always, so you can check it out there. But mainly, in your helmet, you want to have Kinetic Siphon for your Outbreak Perfected. You could also have Hands-On and or Dynamo for the super region and melee-based combat with those mods. In gloves, you want to have 3 copies of Heavy-Handed because you make the cooldown for Heavy-Handed almost non-existent. That way, every time you make a melee kill or a slam, you will get an Orb of Power, which in turn will help you get DR and your super faster. In your chest, it's always going to be resist mods to whatever activity you're doing, so plan accordingly. In your boots, you're going to have regen mods, so recuperation, insulation, absolution, to either get back your health or reduce your cooldowns on your abilities. And then lastly, in your class item, the exotic class item in this case, I would go with Reaper, Outreach, Utility Kickstart, or Distribution. Any combination of these help out your build in some way or form, so utilize that how you will. Last thing that I will note about this build is its weakness. The one weakness this build has is obviously its close range combat. So this means if you're going into an activity where there's lots of CC level enemies, such as Dustfield Shanks, Exploder Shanks, Cursed Thrall, Fanatics that leave that stupid pool and explosion when you kill them, those types of enemies, then this build flounders a little bit because obviously you don't want to just Consecration Slam into them, at least not close range if you can. So that's the one side of the game where it doesn't really shine that much. Outside of that, if you can avoid that, then you can use this pretty much anywhere else besides, you know, like raid boss, dungeon boss damage phases, because you're not going to consecrate a boss to death. You can try to consecrate the witness, but it's not going to end well. Anyway, that's the video. Thanks to the 3 people that stuck by watching this full video because this build is so common. Let me know what you think in the comments below, and more specifically, let me know if there's other combinations I should try out on the exotic class item that might be fun. Doesn't have to be meta dominant or number 1. I'll try it just because it's fun. Maybe something with Severance Enclosure. We'll see. In the meantime, if you enjoyed the video or the build, please consider subscribing today. It does help the channel grow and is much appreciated. And if you want to go the extra mile, you can leave a like and or comment below as well. If you don't know what to comment, you could leave Consecration as the comment. Thanks for watching. Catch you next time.